Hello everyone, welcome to Chill Deal Trades, where I analyze stocks so you know what's going on. Today we're going to be doing another update video on Alibaba. I made a couple videos, so go back and look at those. But today we're going to cover some of the more recent news happening with Chinese stocks, as well as analyzing the chart to figure out where the price could be headed next. If you're here and you haven't hit the sub button, please hit it and smash it. Join the squad, we're growing, we're on a goal to 500 subs, so please help us get it there. And second, start a Discord, go check that out and join the community. So first thing I want to bring up with Alibaba is earnings coming up. So we have earnings on August 3rd, very important. And it's very questionable how the stock's going to respond. Obviously, we've sold off quite a bit. So we could see a pop on really good numbers, which I pretty much expect from Alibaba. They almost always put in really amazing numbers. Last quarter, they had a fine on their earnings, which brought down some of their profits. To my knowledge, they haven't had any other fines, and Alibaba's going as amazing as they usually perform in terms of a business. So I would expect something good, but a lot of fear, so it could be muted. I personally don't like buying into earnings. I think it's too big of a risk, but we'll go into the chart later in the video to check out maybe where prices to take a peek at or buy in at. As always, the first thing I bring it up, and I talk about it in every video because I think it's so important, is institutional flows. And so, like I've said, we've seen a lot of red over the last couple years compared to buying. So this quarter, I would say the Q3 and Q4 this year are going to be very, very important to see if we start seeing a shift in selling versus buying. Obviously, the stock has moved down drastically. There could be a little bit more downside, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So this quarter, next quarter are going to be very, very important. If we start to see the green being larger than the red, which we're currently seeing in the quarter, but too early to tell, then we could start kind of forming a bottom, around a bottom for Alibaba. So that's just something I want to bring up, as I always do. Next thing is I found a really great article just talking a little bit about Alibaba and some of the things going on and maybe what's impacting the stock. So I just made a video yesterday on kind of Chinese stocks in general, the economy, why we're seeing what we're seeing. So go check that video. That's going to be very helpful for your investment in Alibaba. But a couple things I want to bring in. So if you haven't watched the other videos, some big things have happened over the last few months. So last year, the reason basically why Alibaba started to fall was the CCP halted the IPO of, what's the company called? I put in the description what the company name is. I can't, Alipay. They halted that. And then they were hit with the $2.8 billion fine by the CCP. So two super big events that had a lot of negative impact on the company. But the question is, why is the Chinese government doing this? And this article brings up a really interesting point. They say it's not as much about muting Alibaba as a company. It's more of having control over their citizens. I don't know if you know anything about the Chinese government, but they do a lot of surveillance. There's not a lot of privacy. And so as Alipay and what's the other one? As Alipay and WeChat expand and become the commonplace for payments in China, I think the CCP wants control over what's happening on the back end, and they want control, and they're trying to play a tug of war with Alibaba to get some of that control and understanding what's happening. And so there's going to have to be some give on Alibaba's side, probably more than the CCP side, if they want to be successful over the long term. So that's one interesting point. Another thing is just kind of what's happening. So we know there's a lot of turbulence between China and the US, but also like globally speaking. So June 14th, China was declared a global security challenge by NATO. Super important. On June 23rd, the US banned solar panel imports. So there's a lot of like back and forth and a lot of geopolitical things happening between the two countries, which obviously is going to weigh on the stock. So this is some things that are happening. It's just this tug of war. A lot of, I would say, countries and don't really agree with a lot of what China's doing as a communist party. And so they're getting a lot of backlash. So you're seeing a lot of countries start to flex their muscles at China to try to see how far they can push them to maybe start regulating different or give up some more control or even maybe change aspects of their government. And then the last thing, and we talked about this before, is the valuation on Alibaba is amazing. It's probably one of the cheapest stocks on the market compared to their growth rate. but the question is it enough? You know, it's right now we have all this fear going on with Chinese stocks, and that's why I currently don't hold any. I'm waiting a little bit longer, but I think, as I mentioned in my other video, which you should go watch about Chinese stocks, we're kind of in the fourth quarter in my opinion. But the fourth quarter can obviously, a lot of times, have a lot of drama when it comes to sports. And so I expect a lot of drama over the next few months. And I'm going to see how low this BABA price can get before I decide to jump in. And then lastly, BABA China US, what's next? You know, there's just so much going on. This is an article I would definitely say go take a peek at. I'll link it in the description, just to break down like what's all going on, because it's not just about the company. Obviously Alibaba is a great company. It's the geopolitical tensions, it's the CCP and what they're trying to do to control companies, or what they're doing for the country on the back end. There's all these things happening that are a bigger impact on the stock than you might think. The last thing I want to bring up, kind of as an optimist myself, is this article says, if anybody can survive the Chinese security crackdown, it's Alibaba. And I 100% agree. And that's why I said in my Chinese stock video I made yesterday, if there's anything I'm investing in, it's Alibaba. That's Alibaba, maybe Baidu, or some of the companies that I would be more privy to invest in compared to others. And there was something really good that brought up in this. Oh yeah, it will pass. This will pass. Things always pass. You know, like I said, I think we're in the fourth quarter, so it's going to be a lot of drama. We've already in the fourth quarter, but we're still in it, and there's going to be a lot of drama. But I still think fear needs to grow a little bit more before I jump into the stock. And so keep an eye on it. I would say keep an eye on that KWEB, which is this Chinese stock ETF, as well as, let me see, I think I have it written down over here, as well as the MCHI, because these are showing the overall Chinese market, and Alibaba is going to move with those. It's a large percentage of those, but as other stocks move, Alibaba is going to move. That's just the marketplace right now. The US is seeing the same thing, that stocks are moving together a lot, and the same thing is happening with the Chinese market, so pay attention to that. Lastly, I just want to dive into the charts. So I wanted to go on a weekly basis, because I haven't really covered the weekly as much in terms of candles. And so as you can see, we're in a downtrend. Oops, I'm drawing. We've been in a downtrend for a while. We tried to recently, so this is really important on the weekly, so the 50 and the 100-day. So we're still above the 200-day, which is positive. We haven't broke below on the weekly. This is something we want to pay attention to really closely. 196. 196 is the magic number. If we break below that and hold, we definitely have more downside, probably to the 170 range, but we need to hold this 200-day and go sideways. I would say this is best case scenario as fear continues to pile in, because I think there's going to be more news that comes out about Chinese companies and stocks. So best case scenario is we hold this 200. But on the flip side, when we're seeing the 50 and the 100-day, we're seeing a lot of rejection. So bounce, bounce, broke below, tried to break up above the 100-day recently, as well as couldn't get quite to the 50-day, and we broke back below. And now we're headed to the 200-day. This often happens when we don't break above the 100-day. We typically come down and test 200-day, which we did right here. Now we've come up a little bit. We're kind of gone sideways, but we really want to pay attention to that 200-day. I drew a couple long-term trend lines just to figure out like if we're holding anything long-term. And so the first thing I bring out, if I come back from the IPO 2015, we're still holding these uptrends, which is super bullish. So as we come and test this 200-day, we're also testing these long-term trend lines, and we need to hold these. So if we can't hold 200-day and we can't hold trend lines, like I said, we're probably headed back to somewhere in this 190 to 160 range in the best case scenario. I'm actually going to go to the daily real quick because we have a couple gaps that we want to take a peek at. So when I zoom out, we have a gap all the way at 130, which I would say unless crazy negativity comes in for Alibaba, like delisting or something, and like a greater fear of that, we're probably not going to get down to that low. That's more unlikely, but we've never closed this gap down here, so that's really important to take a peek at if we somehow get crazy bad news, but I highly unlike that. That's highly unlikely. But like I said, last point, just watch out for these trend lines to hold. We also have this kind of downward trend line that has recently formed, and so we're going to want to keep an eye on if we follow this downwards into the 170 range. So like I said, all this accumulation right here, I would say there's a high probability we're coming back to this with all the negativity. The question is how low, and I'm not sure yet. But I hope you liked that video. I tried to keep it a little bit short, even though I still made it 10 minutes as usual. So I really appreciate you coming by, and I said I made another video kind of talking about the Chinese government, what it's doing, why it's doing the things it's doing, so check that out. And join the Discord community. It's slowly growing and more people are joining, so come in there and check it out. That's all I have for you guys. I make a video basically every day, probably not tomorrow on Sunday, but I'll see you again soon.